Hello, welcome to Moonbath Chats, where I chat about what's been on my screen lately. Before we get to what I've been watching, let's talk about a current event, mostly how people have been feeling lately, particularly this person representing the working class of the US at this moment, who
Pay us enough to fucking live or afford to live. At least pay us enough not to do this shit.
decided to burn up the warehouse he worked at, stating that all you had to do was pay us enough to live. Several $1 million worth of toilet paper, other stuff, I think, mostly paper, in this warehouse were set ablaze because this person was so desperate. It's pretty sad, right? That like people have gone to the point where they risk going to jail for 10 years. I believe he's probably going to go to jail for. It seems that he had planned this out so no one was there at the time. Nobody was hurt. Only commodities were extinguished here. And yeah, it's been making the rounds on the social media. He referred to himself as kind of comparing himself really to Luigi Mangione, who was this suspected or alleged murder of that healthcare CEO that no one really cared too much for, because CEO was responsible for many deaths through the parasitic exploitative healthcare system of private insurance. But anyway, so yeah, it's a sad state we're in right now, and I feel like he represents the feeling a lot of us are having, and not and it includes not just like the working class, the proletariat. Really, it includes pretty much anyone who isn't making their money out of capital, right? They're making their money through their labor. So that includes even professional class, managerial class. So I think most of us identify with the arsonist, right? If you're not someone who owns the warehouse or owns these businesses, right? And I think that's something to be aware of, even if perhaps you do have a decent wage right now, right? Because we're all at the whims of the capitalist class, and the whims of their so-called free market. It's just a sad state we're in right now. But I don't know if it's been really covered too much on the news or anything. Not that I watch news on the TV these days ever, really. But it's definitely been memeified. We can look at some memes too. Oh yeah, okay. Let's go look into the article first. Like, this is a really important thing from the article. This is, I guess, the assistant to the U.S. attorney for the Central District of California said, "Look, America is founded on free enterprise and capitalism." And Bill Saley, the first assistant United States Attorney General for the District of California, during the press conference, anyone who attacks or values our way of life, our system, which provides the best goods and services to most people, we're going to come aggressively. So this is kind of like the myth that capitalism is the best option we've got, which is not true, as evident in in what Abdul Karim said or did, um, and what a lot of us are experiencing right now all over the world. Even more so, in outside the imperial core. Third world countries that are ridden with war, caused by the U.S. imperialism, all that. So it's very out of touch way of looking at things, of course. But this is this attorney here is really defending the class that provides for him, right? Which is the capitalist class, and they're going to defend that system for as long as they can. I don't know if this is any indication of if a revolution is around the corner or not. It's just more indication of perhaps late stage capitalism. It's not like, I don't feel like the person who did this, Jamal Abdul Karim, is completely literate in political theory, on revolutionary theory. It's just not really maybe something a more organized revolutionary group would do. Perhaps they would do this differently, perhaps. It is more just like an outcome, a consequence of the mistreatment of workers, right? And that's there's this other post that I want to reference here from David Dole, who illustrates more about this. So recently, Apple closed down a store, a U.S. store that started to unionize or became unionized. And this is something that's happened, with Amazon, with other companies. They start closing down. Starbucks, they start closing down places that start unionizing. And really unionizing, as David Dole says, is the compromise, because really back to really FDR liberal capitalism is really what helped maintain capitalism in place with the New Deal and all that. And with unionizing and unions and stuff in the workers' movement back then, that kind of allowed for the people not to revolt, really, because if you give the workers at least enough to live on, enough to have a living wage, then it's not going to lead to moments like this fire as much, right? And so really, if capitalists really want to maintain their power, all they have to do is just give more crumbs, more, a little bit more, just enough to maintain some peace, But we're at a point now where they're getting, even more greedy than it appears that they have been in the past. And so perhaps if more moments like this happen, if more Mangione type moments like this happen, that may curtail some of the abuses. I don't know. But the point is that but unionizing, again, stuff like appealing to demands from the workers is the compromise under capitalism. And really the only way to surpass this and overcome and go beyond this really subordinate state that we're in is to revolutionize how the economy is structured, really, right? And who is in power, instead of having a dictatorship of the oligarchy, perhaps we need the proletariat, the workers in power, right? That would make democratic sense if the workers had a say in in their pay, in how they distribute the profits of a business, they wouldn't be desperate enough to set it on fire, you know. And that's what, you know, socialist revolution is about. And a lot of the memes are focused on wages, you know, on the spectacular imagery of a burning warehouse. It's that image spreads like a good meme. The beacons are lit. This is a Lord of the Rings reference. The working class calls for aid. Is there a vanguard party out there? We're gonna rescue we're gonna start the revolution. It doesn't appear to be. I feel like we still need to develop more class consciousness. We're not quite there yet. So a lot of the memes are based on the wages. Only livable wages can prevent warehouse fires. You know, that's a way to keep simmer down the fires, but hostility will still be present, and oppression, unless there's an actual revolution that will be fought by those lawyers we talked about, and you know, the working class in general, because this is again the myth that the best goods and services for most people is, you know, capitalist realism is the best we got. But in reality, if we had, you know, more cooperation within, you know, maybe you could there's different ways, you know, an anarchist would want it to abolish the state completely, but I feel like we at least need to at first have a transition period of a socialist state, who perhaps, you know, like we could have a sort of controlled economy, and put in place a system where, you know, the workers cooperate within their community to, you know, distribute and produce the commodities or whatever we need for each other, for us to survive. And then eventually the state would wither away, and there would just be these administrative leftover administration that will facilitate you know, free association amongst the people, and then it would lead to for each according to their need, you know. And so that's a general idea, but I think, you know, hopefully moments like this can lead to more class consciousness, and so we don't have to keep having these sparks, these moments where there's, you know, a big fire or a murder of a CEO or something. I think it's time to move beyond that, right? Start building that socialist, I guess start building a socialist state, really. You know, that goes beyond like what we see in Europe even, you know. Or even somewhere like China. But it, you know, we have like, you know, certain politicians who are more social democrats than they are socialist, that are getting that way, and it seems that definitely younger generations, Gen Z and probably Alpha, are probably gonna lead the way towards actually electing people that are more socialistic. But, you know, last time we talked about general strike, like maybe stuff like that can help as well. But, you know, again, moments like this, I at least hope will awaken people who are still like on the fence about capitalism being the only way, we're still going to have people shouting this nonsense to try to distract and try to, I guess, imprison really and engage people who are opposed to the status quo. And it would be nice to see like these videos, if something similar happens in the future, somebody, in the video maybe saying more and clash conscious things, referencing more socialist values and principles, perhaps. That would really be a big educational moment for the populace, perhaps. Of course, and the media is going to go wild on it and criticize anyone who does that as communist and a bad influence. But that's the struggle. That's going to be the struggle until we move beyond this moment. But that's what's been going on. That's what sets this video in the middle of April 2026. Who knows what's going to happen next week. I've been thinking of maybe doing these current event segments at the end of the video. I don't know. But I also feel like maybe it also depends like what it has been going on, like maybe some news, some current event incidents feel like they're more important than the others, or I don't know. But I was just thinking like it's probably good to have like your vegetables before you get into the fun stuff, which is I've been watching some movies. Pretty much I've been only watching Wuthering Heights. So I'm on my continuing on my literary literature adaptation, literary adaptations. And because the new one came out this year from Emerald, which we'll get into in the end, I wanted to watch like a good amount of these Wuthering Heights adaptations. I never read the book. I started reading or listening to the audiobook last night, and it's not really something I might continue or not. We'll see. But it's definitely, considered a classic in English literature, and definitely a story that I've been wanting to be familiar with, right? So I decided to watch 5 Wuthering Heights adaptations, starting with the 1939 William Wyler adaptation, which stars Merle Oberon as Kathy and Laurence Olivier as Heathcliff. Now, this one's kind of like a standard old Hollywood adaptation, probably the most regular, I guess even safest adaptation you could imagine. From this time period, of course, that's what you would expect, and it's not like a bad movie. It's well done, but again, it feels safe. It doesn't really showcase too much of the villainousness of the characters as much as maybe you would expect from the novel. Of course, I haven't read the novel, but I've know a decent amount about it based on what I've read and the video essays I've been watching about Wuthering Heights. Oberon is pretty good in here, though. Be Kind Rewind did a good video on her, and how she's like one of the first mixed race actresses to really get a good footing in Hollywood and get attention in Hollywood, getting some good roles at the time. But yeah, this one, like, there's not much to say about it besides that, like, it's an okay adaptation, and I think Oberon probably is the best part of the movie. But it's very classical, of course. Nothing too scandalous really about this one. And of course, most all these adaptations do not adapt the whole novel. The whole big thing about it is that most of them, I think, except for maybe one, which we might get into, or I think we'll get into, doesn't adapt the ending, right? And so we are going to probably go into spoilers for generally the general plots of the book, from what I know. And then, you know, each one of these that I'm going to talk about is pretty distinct, but they all cover pretty much the same opening first half of the book. This one does do the framing device, which is not, like, I was reading the audiobook and like I was listening to it, and it wasn't very engaging to start off like this. So I kind of it makes sense why most of the movies don't even start with the opening framing device of the tenant coming to Heathcliff, because this Heathcliff is like, I guess the tenant is like, does he have a house on the land or something? He's not going to live at Heathcliff's house, no. But it basically starts off with him coming here, and then he's getting told the story of Kathy and the toxic romance, all that, from Nellie here, the house servant worker. And then we go to the childhood sequence, right? And some of the adaptations don't cover even this childhood stuff. And so this one kind of has like the breadth of it. It does you know, except the ending part, that last half of the book, it pretty much tells you most everything from the opening, including the framing. So it's kind of like a good primer to the story, but also not super necessary. I would maybe even skip this one if you only want to watch a couple of them. But it's not bad, you know. It's like a 3 out of 5 stars type of movie, which I think is still pretty good. It's not awful or anything. And, you know, good for historical viewing if you want to know where, because I think it's pretty much the first one. There might have been like a silent film version, I don't know. So that one's that one. And then the next one I watched is probably my favorite of them. This one is, I think, even harder to locate. This is Luis Buñuel's adaptation of Wuthering Heights, Abismos de Pasión. And so this is a Mexican film, right? Luis Buñuel is a Spanish director, but he lived in Mexico for a while, right? He moved there, and he made a bunch of Mexican films. And he also then went back to France. He did French films. But this is one of his earlier stuff. This is 1954. So Buñuel, you know, he's like a surrealist, right? He's known for like his surrealist, dreamy films. What's it called? Belle de Jour. What's it called? Is that what it's called? Yeah, Belle de Jour. That's like probably his most well known. Un Chien Andalou. That's the sign. He did a lot of silent films too, right? Discreet Charm Bourgeoisie. So we do get some of that, but it's like his earlier work is not as, and it's more like a standard melodrama, so it's not as surreal. You know, this is actually kind of also a sort of standard adaptation, right? Definitely in comparison to the other ones we're going to look at today. But But I would say if you had to choose between this or the 39 version, I would say this to watch if you want to watch an early adaptation, a black and white adaptation of Wuthering Heights. Because the thing about this one is that it had, you know, I feel like just the direction in general, like you know, these shots here, just little moments of the rain filling up in his hat, like that, like little moments that, or just the framing, just the cinematography, different little moments that, or you can tell like this is a masterful filmmaker at work here, and it's also really heavily melodramatic, right? It does remind me, maybe because it's Mexican film and it's in Spanish, it does remind me of like the telenovela soap opera type of style, right? It's a very heightened, a lot of the dialogue is kind of sometimes over the top, but the thing is that it really works with the story because it really showcases just the wickedness of these characters, Kathy and Heathcliff. It doesn't really hold back. You know, I feel like the 1931-9 version again was safer and it showed a little bit of how mean they are to each other, but not really. This one really kind of showcases, and it does the characters of Kathy and Heathcliff as like these like bad people, terrible people almost, and in an equal fashion, right? It doesn't really paint one or the other as worse off, as worse. Alejandro is called here, not Heathcliff. I don't know. Was that inspiring? Did that inspire the Lady Gaga song? I don't know. Alejandro. But yeah, this was fun. Like, you know, if you're on board with like, it's almost like the melodramatic, you know, almost campiness of it. It's not. It's more just like, again, like a telenovela, but like, I guess we can even show you an example of the type of performance here.
Podría apoderarme de todo y después echarlos a latigazos para quedarme contigo.
¿Y no lo piensas ya?
Ahora mismo. Otra vez es tiempo de escapar.
Voy a tener un hijo de Eduardo.
¿Y qué me importa a mí eso?
So you can tell there the type of the acting that's pretty, like, you know, I think it works, and again it shows like, you know, there's like this little smile here. It kind of shows like some of like the selfishness and like kind of manipulation that these characters have in them. You know, like she likes to see him suffer because she wants him to love her so much. But then she's also not so considerate about his position. You know, while she gets married, she marries for you know, for comfortability and stuff. And then he feels, you know, jilted and acts revenge because of that. And so, you know, they play off each other that way. And, you know, and the way she's kind of mean to Isabella's character is, you know, it really showcases their selfishness, I think. And it doesn't really, you don't really sympathize with them as much as is in the other movies. And so I think it's fun. And then I think what really makes this, and then I think what puts it over the top besides all that is the ending. I think it's just really fun, and super dramatic, which I guess we can do a little spoiler tag. Also, all these characters are fun in this version. Again, as long as like you don't take it too seriously, the acting, because like a lot of acting is over the top. Like he's always like, I'm gonna, you know, let me kill him right now, let's go kill him, and then he takes his gun out. This is the drunk brother character of Kathy. So again, we're doing more spoilery stuff, but this probably has my favorite ending. So at this point, you know, Kathy's dead, you know, and I like this little monologue here he has, really showcasing how how depressed he is about the situation. And he goes to the grave to unearth her grave. And then in this version, the brother actually shoots him. So like from what I understand in the novel, Heathcliff goes and digs up the corpse of Kathy and embraces her. And then eventually, and that's like the middle of the novel, right? And then eventually he goes back, and Kathy did have children, and he like raises their children and takes their money or something. And then there's this whole, it goes more into the theme of like just the trauma of having his love, his unrequited love die, or not really unrequited, but love that they didn't have that happy ending, right? But then again, this doesn't go into that. This kind of ends at this moment, almost necrophilic moment, right? And we see actually the ghost of Kathy here. So again, this is like the moment where it becomes like a Louis Buñuel, characteristically Louis Buñuel movie. We see there's a little moment of surrealistic, like dreamy nature of it all. I imagine he's gone without sleep here. He's like super, in grief and depressed. He looks very sleepy here. But he's like mesmerized by her ghost, really. And of course, that's probably like in his mind and everything. But of course, it's actually the brother who's going to shoot him. And this is a good shot here. Like, it looks like it's just an image, a still image. And then with special, like with the practical effects, it's just like shooting the image with like some paint or something. But played out, really fast. It's like he's getting shot in the face, right? Without it being too graphic. It's kind of more like you have to imagine it in your head. It kind of does the work for you a little. It like helps you imagine it. But with the music and everything, that's just a super dramatic Buñuel ending there. I just like that. So, I don't know, like all together, this was like my favorite of the adaptations.
Júrame que no lo volverás a buscar.
For sure. And yeah, okay, so then the thing that these adaptations so far haven't really done, and I don't think most of them don't do, is really go more into the class politics of it all and the race politics. There's only one that we'll get to that has adapted Heathcliff as a person of color, and it's pretty clear in the books that he is at least dark-skinned, perhaps mixed race. He's usually in these adaptations cast as, with dark hair and slightly darker complexion perhaps, but not really. And this one, this is a Mexican film based in Mexico. So some of these adaptations do take place in different locations versus in the original story, which is like in northern England, right? Or northern UK, Yorkshire area. But the idea there is that like Heathcliff is adopted. The father of Kathy, finds him while he's in Liverpool, and so we suspect that he was, kidnapped or something from another, probably either like North African or Middle Eastern country or something, and then there's throughout the book there's a lot of slurs referencing his race or at least appearance. So but besides that aspect, we don't get, this one does skip the childhood aspect of the story, so we don't get too much of that. We don't get too much of the connection, but because again it's like super melodramatic and overly in that way, like the acting, like and we see their wickedness really clear. Like it's not really necessary to see their upbringing as much because we really get who they are, you know. So yeah, and then the next one I watched was a Japanese version. There's a Japanese version of Wuthering Heights. So like I've seen videos of people like comparing different adaptations, and it's usually like all the English versions, right? There's like a couple more maybe BBC versions or something that were done I think in the 90s or so. But the Buñuel one and this one, I people don't really talk about, maybe because like they're kind of they're from a different perspective culturally, right? But I find these to be the more interesting ones of all the adaptations. I think probably the ones that I would recommend if you were gonna watch just two. It would probably be, I would say, the Buñuel one and then this one, and then maybe the Andrea Arnold to get more realistic version of it, or contemporary version of it, which we'll get into after this. So this one is by Yoshishige Yoshida. I'm not very familiar with his films, but he is a Japanese director. This is 1988. So this one is very different. So this one kind of slows down a bit more. Let's see. Let's go to the pacing of this is more slow, but it kind of it has that samurai vibe to it, right? It's not quite a samurai movie. There is like a lot of, this one is a lot darker and violent. So we do get like scenes of bloody scenes. Heathcliff is a lot more aggressive and clearly villainous in this one. He is pretty much characterized as a outright villain in this one. We don't get too much of the childhood between them, and he's actually the Heathcliff's version here. The version of Heathcliff actually seems to be much older than Kathy. This is Kathy. Of course, they have different names here. Onimaru is Heathcliff, and Kinu is Kathy. But it looks like she's like a child here, and then he's kind of an adult already when he's brought over. And there's a whole subplot here that like basically they're on this mountain, right? And like he's like a lord, but like they are part of this tribe, this almost like this religious tribe that comes up here, and they do this ritual. And so the lord, I think this is like Kathy's dad. It was a bit confusing exactly what was going on, but he drinks like the thing, and then they blame him drinking the ritual sake on Heathcliff, and so he's punished. But Kinu / Kathy protects him. And then also in this one is like the only one I think that actually gets more into like the pregnancy and Kathy having children, because it's actually in the book again, in the later half, Kathy's daughter, and I think she has a son too, they're more involved in the story, right? And so we actually get a little bit of that in this one. But again, this starts off like this, and it's really interesting. Like the visually, this is like maybe the most visually striking of them all. It has, it's almost like painterly, and like all the actors are very like statuesque. You can just tell by a lot of these images here. And again, it's a slower paced, particularly at the beginning. So just like cinematically, this is probably the standout of them all. Now because this kind of showcases Heathcliff or Onimaru as very villainous, I feel like we don't get, what's missing is more of the interiority of his character. And again, there is it is a more adult version. There is moments of, again, violence and blood, but also sexual assault. So that's another thing that could be an issue for something definitely to be aware of if you want to watch this version. And so we are going to get into more spoilery aspects of this one now, but like I feel like it's hard. Like for the most part, I think the assaults moments are mostly justified, but it's through the story because of just that showcases how his demonic character, because really like he is a demon pretty much in this version, but at times it does feel a little bit contrived. So I feel like those scenes may not be as agreeable to be necessary for some viewers. And I think that in general, because of that, just because of the general tone of this movie, it's not as a fun watch experience compared to the Buñuel movie, which was a heightened dramatic film, versus this one, which is just more serious and dark in that sense, and not really fantastical either, even though it has like the samurai imagery in it and some like allusions to the cultural demonic images and stuff. So there's a little bit of that myth telling in this one. This one's definitely more mythical. But yeah, so then so like some of the issues here are like this scene here, it's pretty, this is more of a consensual scene, but then as we get into when Kathy passes, like I think Cassie again here, Keanu's character isn't really shown to be very wicked at all. Like the only thing is that her motivation, or I guess the motivation of Isabel's character to marry the demon character Onimaru, which is the Heathcliff character, is to maintain, is to keep them on the land, like to stay in the house and stuff, versus in the other versions Heathcliff like comes back with all these riches and like just buys out the house. Like I feel like the motivations are a little bit different here. Like I think Heathcliff in this one, he becomes like the shogun, gives him more power. He makes him like a sort of feudal lord, and that's how he comes back with more power instead of the other versions where he like mysteriously gets rich. So there's those little subtle differences there. But again, yeah, the Kathy character, the Keanu character, we don't really get. She doesn't really seem that wicked of a character in here. So she kind of becomes a very more sympathetic character, while Heathcliff gets all the bad attributes. And I think that's probably the more unfortunate part about this movie, which is kind of just unrelentingly critical of Heathcliff. And of course, he does a lot of like his he assaults, he murders. Like it's clear that this particular version of Heathcliff is completely unredeemable, but the thing about, you know, other adaptations or the story itself is that part of the tragedy of it is that, like, why is Heathcliff the way he is? Why does he become so vengeful, you know, and become so demonic in certain aspects? Well, it's because of his upbringing, you know, and how he was treated. But this one's kind of skips that, so we don't really, you know, we just kind of have to, you know. So this one, if, in certain sense, this might be the most probably offensive to the character of Heathcliff, because he is represented as a, you know, has a darker skin here, but of course the demographics in Japan are much different than other places, but he's not really, again, we're not really able to understand or given too much insight on how he feels during this period when he's pretty much treated like a slave, right? And so it's so his outburst as he becomes a demon, like, it's almost like it just kind of portrays him as kind of like naturally evil, you know, and not really a product of his circumstances, which is unfortunate. So, you know, but again, we get these, like, you know, samurai stuff scenes where there's a lot of blood spraying and stuff. So if you're into samurai movies, it's definitely the version to watch. But yeah, again, it's not like the main part of it. Like, it's kind of just like this and another scene really that we see, and it builds up to it too. So it works well here because, you know, it's a good build up. And then, of course, we get more of the later half of the story where now, you know, Kathy's dead, and now Kathy's daughter becomes a big part of it. And so this is another moment where this is, I think, the second sexual assault scene. There's one earlier on here that's pretty rough to watch with, I think that's Isabel's character. I feel like maybe that one maybe was a bit superfluous. The later one at first feels like maybe too unnecessary, but this is part of her plan, I guess, to like lure him into a sort of vulnerable moment where it's kind of also doesn't now more thinking about it, it doesn't also make too much sense, because like she's like risking her life really to get him to a position where she's being assaulted, and then to get this other servant character to rescue her and kill the demon, kill Heathcliff. So that's her plans. Like, so it wasn't. It's again, this kind of feels a bit, again, like a bit contrived. Like, okay, let's have this woman character, the Kathy daughter's character, be part of this you know, rape scene pretty much, as part of a plan to get Heathcliff killed, to show how evil he is, you know, and hopefully it all works out. But it feels really kind of a risky thing to do, right? And then, you know, while I guess even the previous version, the previous assault scene with, I think, was Isabel's character. Okay, this actually goes into I just made me think of other things, but that one, like, you know, she's actually seducing him. That's part of her character, and she kind of plays with him more. And then it kind of showcases how, like, the dangers that she's in. Like, she's not. She thinks she's in control, but then he takes control, and then, you know, then it goes south, and he assaults her, and like maybe that scene felt more justified. I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, the thing about this other scene is that, at least at the beginning, she starts off with like being in the coffin, I think. And that was a fun little moment where like she's in the coffin of her mother, you know. So it does feel like a little bit more empowering here because she's like mocking him and she's laughing the way she laughs. So there are moments of where it feels like she has a good amount of agency, and it does a little bit of catharsis of him getting back at him. But again, it's like it's kind of not thought out so well, it seems, or felt like perhaps, you know, a male director writer adapting the story versus maybe a female writer would do it differently. And you know, and then it ends up being a little more, some more samurai stuff, action, and it's a pretty, you know, pretty cool moments here with the hand getting chopped off, and it pretty much ends with the servant character. I think he's considered a cousin. I forgot what it was. Then he rescues her, and then but it ends up he ends up not killing him because like he assumes that, like, also kind of silly, he assumes that he's dead because he chopped his hand off, and then but he's still alive. But they just figure that he's not going to come back, and then at the end he does. But in a kind of mystical moment, the horse with the body of Kathy, of Kinu, in the coffin, rides back to Heathcliff / Onimaru. What's his name? Onimaru, yeah. And then they walk off into the fog, which is kind of a different take on the ending, reminiscent of just, I think in the book there's references how Heathcliff ghost and Kathy's ghost are haunt the moors at the end, right? And then there's a visual of that in the 1939 version of them just walking together as ghosts in the fog. And so it's kind of reminiscent of that, but instead it's like he's pretty much gonna walk. He's gonna go walk in the fog, but then you imagine he's gonna, you know, die by her side, you know, in the coffin eventually. He's gonna collapse, and basically, maybe even he might even go back to the burial site and put and collapse in the pit in the burial coffin hole with the casket, you know. That's how that ends. So yeah, this one again isn't as a version that I think is very is watched a lot. Like, I would like to see more analysis on this one. But it's interesting to watch such a distinct version, you know, and this one's from a Japanese perspective. Again, I feel like the Heathcliff character was ill-served in this one, but again, it's like a whole different, almost like a different story anyways, so. And I think that maybe the female characters were also ill-served overall. But it's kind of like at least somewhat of a happier ending for them, you know, Kinu's daughter. But yeah, it still probably ranks up there besides all the criticisms, as one of the more interesting adaptations. All right, we're gonna get into a couple more, but I do have to take a quick little break here. When I come back, we're gonna talk about Andrea Arnold's version. Where's the... Okay, BRB. I forgot to mention that in the previous in the version, this Japanese version, also was interesting about this version is the just how dark and macabre this one is. Besides the blood and stuff, there's that scene I skipped over of him like unearthing the corpse, and we actually see like the blood and guts pretty much, or no, like the intestines and the worms. Like it's pretty pretty graphic. Like we see the worms and intestines there, and it's completely repulsed and stuff. Like even in the latest Emerald Fennel version, we don't see stuff like this. Like this is just another aspect of how this one stands apart from the other ones. It's not it doesn't shy away from the gruesomeness of it, and maybe it could have explored it maybe more, like, you know, intertwine the ideas of love and death perhaps more, but this one is more visceral about it, at least, because that's a big theme about the story, right? You know, how they're intertwining those two things, the trauma of it all, and all that. So I don't know, I just thought that was another interesting tidbit about this version. But then I watched Andrea Arnold's version. So this one, 2011. I am interested in watching more of her stuff. American Honey I watched a while ago, which is pretty good. I still have to watch Fish Tank. But you know, her style definitely is a lot more grounded, a lot more realistic. And this one is, let's pull up the video. So Andrea Arnold's version is a lot more naturalistic. It's more like with the shaky cam and all that, it feels more like almost a documentary style. So you get really immersed in the story here, and it focuses a lot on the childhoods of Heathcliff and Kathy, which we get a bit of in the 1939 version, and then we do get a bit of in the new Emerald Fennel version. But this one, like pretty much half the movie is them as children, and I actually like that. And I think some people thought maybe this part of the movie was like too slow paced and boring or something, but I appreciated showing so much of it because I felt like I really understood their characters, particularly Heathcliff. Heathcliff in this one is the central figure, I think, in the movie. We get to understand him a lot more, and this is, I believe, the only adaptation where Heathcliff is cast as a dark-skinned person, which is more which is what's in the book, right? Closer to what we see in the book. So we get to see, him being mistreated, and really, the big part of Heath's character is that he is a whole different, almost like a caste system, whole different class of these characters. Even though like the family here isn't like, super rich or anything, they still take this servant. He's pretty much a slave, of the family here, and he's treated, not like a human, except for Kathy. He's the only person that shows some affection towards him and care for him. In particular, in this version, more so, and I think in other versions, Kathy is maybe more you can sense that she's more caring for him. Even though, it starts off with her spitting in his face when she first meets him. There's a little bit of that meanness, and that might be one of the weaker elements of this movie or this version, is that we don't really get to see that much of the wickedness and mean-spiritedness of either of these characters, and Heath in particular is super sympathetic in this version, which I think is probably fine for this version in general, but it does feel like it deviates from maybe the original story. And I think, because he is we have a black actor here as Heathcliff, the tension, the racial and class tensions between these characters is a lot more in your face and visceral, and you do feel for Heathcliff a lot more because of that, which I think is a pivotal part of the story that felt missing in every other adaptation, right? It felt a little, it didn't land like Heathcliff's position and his suffering and depression didn't really feel as grounded as this one, or as impactful. And so, but the other thing about this is just the style of the filmmaking here. It does feel somewhat distant at times because we don't get that much dialogue from the characters. It's a lot of like inferred. We infer what their emotions are, and I think for the most part, particularly in the opening, in the first half, it works really well. Like because of what's happening and how he's treated, we get a good sense of what they're feeling, and they are like kids, So it's like, it's a lot more understandable, what they're going through. We don't really need to get too much into the specifics of their feelings verbally, because it's pretty clear. And so, it spends a good amount of time. And I actually prefer the first half of this movie. So again, we're going to just get into more spoilers right away, pretty much. But then like when it gets to the second half, the style and of this film kind of starts to wear thin a bit. And again, see, we're already like halfway through and there's still kids. So now we transition. He runs away at the moment that she hears that she's gonna marry the richer guy, right? I forget his name. Longhorn, is that his name? Linton, Mr. The Lintons, right? Is that and so and then, you know, I think in most other adaptations, and maybe I don't know how it's like in the book, you know, this moment where he overhears Kathy, you know, he only hears parts of it, you know, she still loves Heathcliff, but, you know, of course she wants those comforts of a nice, you know, upper class life. And so she goes to marry him. And so he doesn't hear the last part where she's like, you know, still in love with Heathcliff. And so he runs out into the rain. Again, it's also like the scenes of the rain here feel really real and almost like you can like really feel for them. Like you can really feel Heath like walking in the rain. You feel wet while watching this. Yeah, so then we cut here and he's back. And again, we don't get much detail at all, like how he got his money. I think in some adaptations, he finds out that he is of noble birth or something, and he was kidnapped from like some noble family. Like the thing that one of the characters says is that he's the son of like, what is it, like a Chinese father who was like some royalty or something, and then an Indian mother or something, similarly of noble birth. But I think it's intended to be vague. But it would have been nice, especially with this one, because it's much more grounded and feels more realistic and naturalistic. It would have been nice to have like an addition in some explanation of how he got his money. You know, there's also suspicion that he stole his money or something. And that could have been, you know, referencing just some inherent racism from some of the characters. And so, but anyway, so we don't know so much, but then the thing is that, like, again, because this maintains the same kind of style, but the characters like of Kathy and Heath, they feel like they don't really grow that as much from their childhood versions. They feel like they're acting very similar. We don't get too much dialogue between them, so we don't really get to understand how they're feeling at the moment. We have to again infer, but as adults it kind of feels a little bit stilted now. You know, their interactions, it feels like there's something missing. There feels like maybe there's some scenes missing here on like when they start despising each other some more. You know, we get some interesting moments here of, you know, even a little bit of that S&M situation that we see more of in the Emerald Fennell version, but more so between Kathy and Heathcliff here, which is a little different than we'll get to it. But similar story beats here. You know, the brother character is a gambler and an alcoholic, all that. And that's how Heathcliff is able to buy the place back to pay off the debts of the brother. And interesting, you know, we get some like quick little flashbacks, you know, to remind us again. It's a very visually told, a lot of visual storytelling here, you know, to showcase his emotions and stuff. Like he's remembering running in the fields and the moors with Kathy there. And then here we have Isabella, who I feel like is a little bit more meek version of her than in other adaptations. So then the idea is that, of course, out of revenge, he marries Isabella. But a lot of these scenes here, like the emotional scene here of her, Kathy realizing that he's gonna marry Isabella, like it doesn't, the impact is, it doesn't fully land here, or um, it's very immersive, like feels very naturalistic and real, but how it's shot. But I think because we don't get that many scenes of them kind of a back and forth rivalry or bickering or any of their, we don't see much of their villainous wicked traits as adults. Like it feels a little bit out of place, or like, again, like there's some missing scenes here to really build up to this moment. And so some of these emotional moments kind of fall flat a bit because of that. So I think that's really probably the major fault of this movie, which really kind of is a little bit of a letdown for me in comparison to what I thought maybe the first half was building towards. It felt like it was going to build towards something big and more dramatic, but it kind of just fizzles, unfortunately. And then, of course, Kathy passes, and the ending to this one is just him walking by himself. Oh, another thing that I didn't like about this movie is the cruelty to animals here. I believe this is actually real things they did. They let the kid hang this puppy here. Like, doesn't look very comfortable. And there's another scene too with another dog that did that too. It's like, it's just kind of just off-putting. Like, they don't think that was necessary. Like, it's a reference to something that happens in the book, I guess. That they do that to the dogs in the book, but I don't think that was necessary to adapt, or at least shot it in a different way where the animals weren't clearly being irritated or annoyed. I mean, I know, like, for a lot of animals, like, it doesn't hurt them because they're kind of like, I think particularly cats, like, whether cats pick up their kittens from the neck that in a certain manner like that. So it's probably it's probably not as bad as it looks, but I feel like it's I don't think it's necessary for those scenes to be there. But again, this is a naturalistic version of what people would be like back then, and do it and behave as they would. So then this one, we just get like him walking to the moors, and remembering this moment here again. This is a little bit of the power dynamics here. When they were kids, we see some of that, him pushing her into the mud, and then her kind of enjoying it a little bit, Fennell, I think in the next movie we're going to talk about, indulges more into that aspect of the relationship. And so it's kind of just flashbacks here instead of showing like a ghostly image or anything, which is in style and with the rest of the film. But again, I feel like it doesn't fully connect, because I feel like, again, these adult characters, I feel a little bit mismatched with what we saw earlier in the opening. So, but again, it's a decent adaptation, and definitely one that's more realistic adaptation. If you want to, one that's not melodramatic. It's like the opposite of melodramatic. So that's kind of like, in a way, from my understanding, the book itself is like considered a sort of melodrama. So it's a departure stylistically in that way from the book. So depending on on what you're looking for, this might still work. So I think, you know, this would be probably the third movie to watch if you were to watch 3 of them. But yeah, that's Andrea Arnold's version. Next up, the final one I watched. I feel like this is slightly torturous to watch so many Wuthering Heights adaptations in 1 week. Because at this point, like I was like, at this point, I was kind of just getting a little bit tired of the story, and the only good thing is that like each version I watch is pretty distinct from each other. So at least it was kind of fun to watch the major differences. But as for the plot, I was like, okay, at this point they're not doing too much different, you know, with it. So Fennell here, you know, a sort of controversial figure, a director, you know, with a lot of our movies. I talked about Saltburn all those years ago. Don't quite enjoy much of her movies. I appreciate her visuals a lot of times. And this one was the cinematographer, I think is a cinematographer from her other movies too. So a lot of people credit more of the visuals to the cinematographer. Also did Saltburn. But you know, either way, she has a good directorial eye. And so this version feels like an adult fairy tale version of the story. And you can, just by looking at its visuals, you know, it's very, you know, has that exaggerated, almost Tim Burton-esque style with the outfits and the sets and all that. And so that's kind of cool to watch. Let me brighten this up. This file's a little dark. Is that enough? That's fine. Okay, and so right, so you know, it's for the most part nice to look at, you know. But at the end of the day, it did feel you know, it did feel somewhat hollow, and I think that like in this now, you know, this is like 2026. This is like what, 15 years or so since the Andrea Arnold adaptation, and it doesn't seem to be at all interested in much of the class or racial dynamics of the story, which I think at this point should be more at the forefront. You know, we have the casting of Jacob as Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff, and Margot Robbie as Kathy, and probably not the best casting choice there. I think they do a decent job, but it feels more like you know, like a sort of fan fiction version of the story from perhaps a privileged individual. And Emerald Fennell is part of the privileged class, but and so it feels very light in that sense, but it flirts with some darkness, but isn't too interested in really going in depth to all the themes of the movie and stuff, and it kind of ends up being more provocative and scandalous or whatever than it is interested in really delving with the themes. Like, it starts off with this hanging, you know, that kind of equates, you know, again, it equates sex with pleasure, but doesn't really go into it as much as you would think it was going to, because then during the hanging, like the victim gets an erection and orgasms, and then everyone just cheers and laughs, and then like everybody starts it's just the whole debauchery of it all. It's just like over the top, and like mostly just feels like they're to shock versus say anything interesting. And then even like the set design and all that, and the artistry of it all feels a little bit like a theme park more than it does a coherent coherent like aesthetic. Like, it just feels, why do we have these jagged bridge mountain peaks here? Like, it feels really weird. And then, is that a bloody river? Is that intentional symbolism or something? I don't know. And then there's a jagged piece here coming in here. And there's a lot of stuff like that. This opening of them as kids also, I think, is probably even the weakest part of the movie. I feel like, I don't know if it's direction or something, but like, these kids do not sell the story very well. And this kid, I think, he was an adolescent. He did a good job in that show. But I think in this sequence here, it's probably some of the worst performances, and really, I almost glazed my eyes over watching the opening here. I just felt really like just lower quality than the rest of the movie, even though the rest of the movie isn't that much better. I mean, a lot of people are dunking on this movie. It's like, I feel like for the most part, it's probably not as bad as a lot of people say. It's not like a 1-star movie or anything. But I feel like it doesn't live up to what it's setting up here. As like, if it leaned more into the adult fairy tale, like, it almost feels like, especially this sequence here of her like wanting them, the neighbors, to visit and everything. And this, if it leaned more into the comedy aspect, I think this would have worked a lot better. I feel like this movie is almost like trying to be like almost like a dark fairy tale version of Princess Bride or something. With like some of these comedic beats here, it feels like it's leaning towards there, but it doesn't get there. So had it been more like that, maybe it would have worked better for me. Doing these little pranks and stuff, and so this also kind of diminishes just the what's going on here in the story, like the class dynamics. Like, he's a servant and everything, but he just kind of seems like he's like this character is wearing a costume of the rugged farm worker or something, and we don't really get a sense that he's being abused or anything. He does get, I guess, whipped by the father here. There is no brother character here. They kind of combine the brother character with the father. But again, it feels like a child's fairy tale. It kind of like compresses the story and like kind of eliminates some more of the serious class critique of the narrative here. And so it just feels like people in costumes in a theme park, not so much, like a movie, and then it focuses a lot on the sort of S&M dynamic between them, as like the real provocative element of the story, without really talking about the actual power dynamics and class dynamics of the characters, more so just a sexual fetish of it. So you know, and it's actually not even as, you know, erotic as the marketing wants you to believe it is, you know. It's more, it's just a lot of kissing, a lot of messy kissing. And you know, there are like sex scenes and stuff, but it's not really that graphic. And then here, like, this is like the first moment where she's experiencing a sort of sexual connection with him. Watching the other farmhands get at it, and we get a lot of that imagery here. And so yeah, it reminds you of other Fennell movies, of Saltburn, where it has a lot of these like cutaways to these evocative images that make you think of fluids, of sexual desire, the patting of the bread flour there, and then she gets off on the cliff here. And yeah, then even this like doesn't feel very sexy to me. It feels like more pretending to be sexy. Him licking her lips there, I don't know. And I mean, this is kind of hot, but I hear that this is not really how corsets work or something, like pulling her within that like constrictor too much, pulling her by the corset strings there. I guess that's kind of like a kinky thing. But I don't know, like the chemistry between them, it didn't really quite work for me. And then so the moments, so again, the film does try to maybe address some race by just casting, you know, people of color. I guess it's pretending to, but really doesn't really address it at all. Like, it's kind of weird that like they chose to cast the rich guy as the person of color who she marries, and then not Heathcliff, and then have, you know, the servant also be, you know, of color. But then again, they don't really get into it. It's almost like it feels like a race blind story where it doesn't matter. Like it has no impact on their characters or their circumstance or their story or anything. Again, just to like get some points on the board. Like, yeah, like, see, like we do have a diverse cast. And so that's what it feels like. And then, right. So then, okay, so this character, Isabella, is probably like maybe the more interesting of the performances here. She's definitely the most heightened character. Almost feels like perhaps she's kind of almost in a comedy, you know, a sort of comic relief character almost. Alison Oliver as Isabella, and maybe her, you know, her style, her acting style is an indication of where maybe the movie should have been going. Again, also the skin thing. This is like weird, like aesthetic choices that again, like almost like could be something that is referencing race or something, but doesn't really get into it. Like he chooses the skin of his beloved Kathy to cover the walls in, right? It feels a little icky, but you would think that maybe at least go into the idea, like, why does he feel like this is the most beautiful skin, you know? Again, it feels like he race blind again, like they don't really address, you know, any beauty standards in this movie. It's more just like it's just a quirky like aesthetic thing for the movie to look interesting and different. Again, kind of like a theme park or something. Again, we have this weird fireplace here. I mean, it looks cool. It looks like a cool place to take a picture in, you know, like let's do a photo shoot in here, you know. And but then it also relies a lot on these montages that like I feel like we could have spent more time in. Like she's like this, the moment of course here is that she's realizing that like she is not really happy even though she has all these luxuries and everything. So it kind of flashes by all this, you know. But I feel like they could have spent more time like in here and at least like make it more satirical or something. I feel like this could have been like a satirical comedy, but it didn't get there. It wasn't like they didn't take the time to do that, or it's not smart enough to do that or something, or like they're uninterested in it. Like look at this big old strawberry. I want to know more about this big old strawberry. You know, it's representative of their gluttony, their, you know, everything's so luxurious. But then what's the consequence at whose expense? You know, Heathcliff is just kind of seen like a characterized as just like a weird, like a sadist, you know. There's no build up or characterization of developing him as someone who's kind of like reacting to his circumstances more, you know, as we saw perhaps in a bit in the Andrea Arnold version, you know, or just in the story. Like it's like too afraid to go there, this movie. And so yeah, so the other thing about the well, this scene is that it's at the moment where they actually start to get more wicked with each other. But again, the buildup isn't there. So then it starts to become more shallow, and then he just becomes a sadist. And I don't completely buy the love between them right now. And then this is just like kind of like a silly scene. I don't know. It feels like an over the top kissing scene. Like it feels like it's trying to be hot, but it's not. I guess I don't know. I didn't find that very alluring. She does have some great outfits. It's definitely her most villainous, you know. But I feel like the villainy, the evilness of her is more presented in her outfits than in her character. So this is an interesting choice here to make this whole scene here of him kind of seducing her, but like he's actually telling her outright, like, I'm gonna marry you to spite Kathy, and you know, like, I don't really love you, and I never really will love you. It's only for revenge against Kathy. And then she, of course, is like, you know, yes, I don't care, you know, I'll marry you, you know, sleep with me right now. And like, that's interesting. That was an interesting choice, but it also kind of feels like a shortcut or something. Like like a shorthand version of what's happened here between him and Isabel, right? Like like it's like spelling it out for the audience, like what's actually happening, instead of like kind of like playing it out more naturally of her, like, you know, thinking that it's some kind of true love, and like playing out her naivete as like more like in reality, and then slowly showcasing that he's actually, you know, it's all planned out, you know, so she can for him to get back at Kathy. So again, it feels a little bit shallow in that sense. And then here, and so the thing about the relationship between Heathcliff and Isabel is that, from my understanding, there's like different interpretations, but in the book there's like different point of views. And then from one point of view, I think the narrator, Nellie or someone, says that Isabel is actually into the marriage and the situation, or something, of being in a sort of way dominated, and that their relationship is like she's sort of consenting to it, and so Heathcliff's domination over her is kind of acceptable or something. But in reality, there's another perspective where actually when it's not told through I think Heathcliff's point of view, and we get more of Isabel's point of view, it's actually more clear that she was being abused by Heathcliff, you know. So to showcase Heathcliff treating her like a dog here, and then her like being all into it and wanting it and like enjoying it, you know, in a vacuum isn't necessarily bad, but in comparison to what the novel was saying, which was much more interested in the dynamic and perhaps misinterpretations of a couple, and showcasing that in fact Isabel was being abused in this situation, this relationship. And this kind of erases that aspect. Doesn't really give the audience there's no question here. It's like, oh no, she's into this puppy play, and she's all for it, and she's not. And Heathcliff isn't really an abusive person that much. He's just like, you know, he just likes to be a sadistic role player for the sake of hurting Kathy, and, you know, isn't assaulting Isabel here because she's into it. So that kind of erases the more the darker element of Heathcliff there, for the sake of perhaps a provocative, you know, kinky scene here, you know, which again, it kind of comes off as more performative, this whole sequence. I don't know. I feel like at the end of the day, like this movie just kind of like feels like it's made in bad taste. I don't know. Like the longer I am away from it, like the more I think about it, or like in the moment, like I was kind of swept away by some of it. And the visuals and everything, but the more I think about it, the more distasteful I feel about it. And like, it kind of leaves you with an icky feeling. I don't know. It kind of left me with an icky feeling, and I'm disliking it more and more the more I'm looking at it now. I don't know, like in comparison to the other adaptations, like it just feels hollower. Feels like it was like trying to do like, it feels more performative, like it's trying to do something fun with it, but kind of missing the point of the whole story. And some of the elements of the tragedy of and the wicked yearning of it, I feel like Emerald's trying to do in Saltburn. And in a lot of ways, I feel like Saltburn's a better movie in a lot of ways, and even though it's not that spectacular movie either, but like, you know, even particularly that scene in Saltburn where Barry Keown's character is like humping the grave, the dirt mound of Jacob Elordi's character. Like, that was almost kind of like an homage to Wuthering Heights, where Heathcliff unearths Kathy. In this version, he just did we say spoilers? We're already in spoilers, by the way. But he just, this is the ending of this one. He just embraces her corpse, and she dies before having the kid. So again, we don't see that aspect of the movie. And then we do get some flashbacks. It's actually kind of similar to the Andrea Arnold version, right? We get the flashbacks of their childhood here, but even more so in this version than that, these children scenes, these scenes of their youth, like, feel even more disconnected. And like, I feel like it kind of lessens the ending to have a flashback here. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I guess just, yeah, like tonally, I feel like overall the tone of the movie kind of is all over the place sometimes. Again, like, kind of begins more like there's certain moments that feel more like a comedy and certain moments that feel too serious. And then it all just feels like a kitschy mess. I don't know. I don't know. It wasn't that great. I would say that I still like, you know, if you're gonna do a flamboyant adaptation, you gotta go all out with the melodrama and just make it more fun. Maybe, you know, maybe make it like, at this point, if maybe make a satire, like an actual satire of the story itself, you know. Like, if you're gonna cast, you know, Heathcliff as, you know, with a white actor as Heathcliff, maybe make that part of the satire of it, making fun of the fact that this is like a big Hollywood movie, you know, that's, you know, too afraid or overshadowing, or he doesn't care to discuss any of the race or class dynamics in the story, which are, I think, are pretty essential to the story. But yeah, that's Wuthering Heights. I would say check out the Luis Buñuel version. That'll be fun. I think it's a fun version. And then, yeah, maybe if you want something a little bit more arty, cinematic than the Japanese version from 1988, and then for more grounded realism, Andrea Arnold, and then I guess the book. Really, you know, I from people that I've read the book, like, they say that there really isn't any good adaptation. So I don't know. I felt like I wanted. There was a lot of talk about the Emerald Fennell version. I was like, I want to see what it's about. Let's see it. You know, it's kind of weird because, like, every time a new Emerald Fennell movie comes out, I always feel like a bit let down by it. But I'm I'm always like kind of morbidly interested in it, into her movies, for some reason. I guess that's the marketing that works. Freaking marketing. But yeah, that's the story. Check out, I would say, Be Kind Rewind did a good video on the earlier Wuthering Heights, and then there's a lot of people doing it, videos about this. Princess Weeks did a good one. She's done a few on Wuthering Heights. There's plenty of other people I can't think of right now. There's just some good ones. But yeah, those are my thoughts. What did you think? Did you enjoy? Some people enjoyed the fun colors and aesthetics of the new one. I don't know. Maybe if you go in with lower expectations, it's probably not gonna be that bad. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. But that's gonna do it for this video. Next time I'll probably go back to watching more War and Peace. I still have to watch part 3 and 4, so I might do that this week, go back to that. And I'm still planning to watch more of these adaptations of the period. I might watch some more of that. Is there any like big movie coming out anytime soon? I don't know. That Project Hail Mary movie was a big deal, but I'm really not that interested in that movie. I don't know. It's like, I hear it's like a good movie, you know, a hopeful movie about an astronaut who's like a nice guy, you know. And it's like wholesome and cute or something with his little companion or something. But also it's like, is it like a little bit like too much about is it too jingoistic? Is it maybe about an American hero? I don't know. Well, it's also based on that book, you know. I don't think I'll read the book either. I was thinking of reading the Wuthering Heights, but I don't think I'll finish the audiobook. There's just so much stuff. I'm still working through Ursula K. Le Guin stuff. I want to read like Octavia Butler. I want to read N.K. Jemisin. So it's like, I feel like I'd rather do that than like read some of the classic stuff. But they say you gotta read the classics, you know. Maybe at some point. But yeah. Anyway, I'm out of here. See ya.